Hey guys, tonight we retrace the epic voyages of early Polynesian navigators who sailed across the Pacific Ocean without any instruments except a paddle, a sail, and a really good memory. And by the end of this story, you will have learned how to read waves like a map, which is an invaluable skill that you will definitely need if you plan on surviving the tsunami that is about to hit your island home. Just kidding. There won't be any tsunamis tonight. But it was important for me to establish now that even though this is a bedtime story, you probably won't survive this. Before you get comfy, please take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And as always, feel free to post where in the world you're watching and what time it is there down in the comments so we can get to know each other better. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let us ease into tonight's journey together. You trudge along the shore, your bare feet slapping against the sand. It's low tide, and you're on the lookout for shellfish. This is your island home. The beach goes on for miles in both directions, but you can see that up ahead the shoreline jets out into the ocean, forming a point. Sure enough, you can see that from this vantage point, the waves breaking far out to sea look like this wavy squiggle. If you were out there, you would be utterly lost. But from here, you can make sense of it all. These waves are like a map, you think, because they're showing you the way home. You lived here all your life, but you're not entirely sure how long ago your ancestors first arrived on this island, perhaps several hundred years ago. They too figured out how to read these waves like maps, and so passed down this knowledge to you. Because it wasn't written down anywhere, no one knows who first discovered this method in Polynesia, but it's considered common knowledge among everyone who lives out here on the islands. It's just understood that waves have shapes, and those shapes tell you where the land might be. That's why the Polynesians never got lost at sea. They could always find their way back home, sometimes after sailing thousands of miles away. Okay, I'll admit it, I lied just a little bit. They did use more than just the waves to find their way around. They used stars too. Historians still argue whether the ancient Polynesians memorized the location of every star in the night sky. But the truth is, they didn't need to memorize them all. Instead, they learned to navigate by following the paths that stars took across the night sky. Because as the Earth rotates on its axis, it appears as if the stars are moving, even though it's really the Earth spinning on its axis that is causing this effect. Ancient Polynesian navigators memorized the path that certain stars would take across the night sky during the course of one evening. Then when they went out to sea, they would orient themselves with the stars and then follow the paths of the stars to estimate their location and direction. For example, the navigator would identify a star that was in the eastern horizon and then track it across the sky until it reached the zenith or highest point directly overhead. At that point, he would know that they had traveled exactly south for half a day and that land should be somewhere nearby. Of course, this is much easier said than done. It takes a lot of practice to get really good at reading the stars like this. And many young Polynesians spent years learning under the guidance of an experienced navigator. But if you're thinking, well, hold on a minute, what if it's cloudy? What if the stars aren't visible? Well, then they would rely on the waves. Here's how it works. You watched those waves crashing near the shore earlier, right? And how you saw how the waves looked like a squiggly line from the shore, but once you were out there, the waves look like this, totally different. So you know that the shape of the waves changes depending on where you are in relation to the wave. But you also notice something else. The shape of the waves actually doesn't change that much. Even out here, these waves are still kind of like a squiggly line, just a lot less pronounced. So if you knew what to look for, you could still get a general sense of the lay of the land. When the waves are like this, coming towards you in a fairly straight line, that means that the coast is probably flat. When the waves come towards you at an angle, that means the coast is curved. And the steeper the angle of the wave, the more quickly the curve of the coastline will change direction. As a Polynesian navigator approached an island, the waves would begin to shift shape, becoming steeper and more angular, indicating that land was close. The deeper the water, the less pronounced the wave pattern. But the closer they got to shore, the shallower the water became, and the waves grew larger and more frequent until suddenly you could hear the pounding of the waves against the shore. But not all waves are created equal. Sometimes the winds pick up and the waves get big and choppy. But these aren't good for navigation. See, for this to work, you need waves that are swells, meaning they're long and smooth. Swells move very fast, almost 400 miles per hour. They travel all the way across the Pacific Ocean from the Americas to Polynesia. That's pretty wild. And even though they may start off small, they grow over time. And when they reach the islands, they become the familiar towering walls of water that you know so well. Reading the waves also requires you to pay attention to other things too, like the color of the waves, the space between the waves, and even the sound the waves make. For example, if the waves are spaced really far apart from each other, that can mean that there's a deep trench in the ocean. Or if the waves are really close together, it can mean there's shallow reefs below the surface. And if the waves are foamy, that can mean that the bottom of the ocean is sandy. But not all waves are created equally. Sometimes the winds pick up and the waves get big and choppy. But these aren't good for navigation. Those are called breakers, and they're way too unpredictable to glean any information from. To navigate, you need waves that are swells, meaning they're long and smooth. Swells move very fast, almost 400 miles per hour. They travel all the way from the Americas to Polynesia. That's wild. And even though they may start off small, they grow over time. And when they reach the islands, they become the familiar towering walls of water that you know so well. Okay, so let's say you've been navigating for quite some time now. The waves have been pretty consistent, and you're feeling confident that you're on the right track. But then suddenly, the waves change shape. They're now crashing over you, pounding your canoe and tossing you around. What do? Well, remember that crocodile dung sunscreen you packed? Well, you're gonna not need it because the sudden change in the waves means that you've found land. It's probably a reef that's close to the surface and it's just below the water. It's called a breaker, like I said earlier. So if you want to get through this safely, you're gonna have to steer around it. To do that, you lean forward and paddle around the front of the wave so you don't get smashed into the reef. Then once you've passed, you can relax and steer your canoe using the waves to propel you forward. The Polynesians were masters of wave reading. They were able to navigate across the vast expanse of the Pacific Ocean without any instruments except a paddle, a sail, and a really good memory. Their ability to read the waves allowed them to survive and thrive in one of the most challenging environments on Earth. But it wasn't just the Polynesians who relied on the ocean waves. Many other cultures around the world, from the ancient Greeks to the Vikings, also developed ways to navigate by reading the waves. Even today, surfers and sailors rely on wave reading to stay safe and navigate the oceans. So next time you're at the beach, take a moment to appreciate the power of the waves and the incredible people who have navigated the oceans using nothing but a paddle, a sail, and a really good memory. Well, that's our journey for tonight. Thank you so much for joining me. Until next time, keep exploring and keep dreaming.